Hi, I'm Alex Miller, president of the West Michigan Wildlife Conservancy, and today I'm going to teach you how to save your hemlock trees from hemlock woolly adelgid using a few products you can buy at your local hardware store. The first step to treating your hemlock trees is identifying that you have them. So to my left here we have several examples of eastern hemlock that we'll be looking at today. A big way to tell it's a hemlock tree is they're mainly an understory tree, but sometimes they're planted in neighborhoods as tree lines. Easy way to identify them is they're going to be a pyramidal shaped evergreen tree with single flat needles, and the way to distinguish them from other sorts of spruces that might have a similar shape is the fact that one, their needles are soft and typically dark green, and the top of the tree will actually droop over a bit. The best time to check for hemlock woolly adelgid is in the winter. Right now it's late April, and the ovisacs, which give hemlock woolly adelgid its name, these little white balls which contain lots of eggs, are the most visible. Once they start hatching during the growing season, they're going to start to disappear and rain will wash them away. So you're going to want to identify these in the winter if possible, and in the early spring they'll still be visible as they are now. Another way you can tell without getting close up to the tree that it's infested with hemlock woolly adelgid is, as you see behind me, these trees are already in serious decline. They look very thin and sickly. They start to go from their typical dark green to more of a grayish color. And especially as we look at the tree we're about to treat, the ends of the branches are starting to die back. That's a bad sign. You definitely want to treat your tree immediately, and because once it gets too far gone, the vascular system of the tree will no longer be able to carry the treatment to the actual adelgids that are on the plant. Another reason you want to treat your hemlock trees immediately after identifying hemlock woolly adelgid is because once the trees are weakened, it opens them up to be killed by secondary pests. So as we look closer here at this tree we just inspected, not only are the ovisacs, so the wool that carries the eggs of the hemlock woolly adelgid, but there's also these little brown spots all over the place, and those are elongate hemlock scale. That is another type of invasive insect that also feeds on the sap of the hemlock. However, it alone normally will not kill the tree, but since this tree is in decline, as we can see, the ends of the branches are starting to die back, and if we look over here at a branch like this, we can see that the needles on the end, which will die first due to hemlock woolly adelgid, they're starting to get yellowy. They're not as dark as the ones back there. So all that sap is getting sucked out. It's getting drained by all these adelgids that are about to hatch, and then all these hemlock scales that are also about to hatch. There's two types of pesticides you can use as a homeowner without a license, with just products you buy at a hardware store to treat your hemlocks. And so we have a systemic insecticide, which is going to go throughout the tree and provide the tree protection against insects that try to feed on it. And then we have foliar treatments, which is something we're just going to spray on the needles to get rid of the insects that are already on there. You can also use these products in combination, which is what we like to recommend. And so because the imidacloprid root soak is going to take some time in order to get into the tree, we can also spray as much as we can of it with the horticultural oil in order to knock down the amount of adelgids that are there and give that tree a chance to bounce back before it starts getting the actual insecticide to protect it long term. So first we're going to talk about our root soak and how to conduct that treatment. So you're going to need a couple things for that. You're going to need some water, you're going to need a bucket, you're going to need an imidacloprid root soak product, you're going to need protective gloves, a soft flexible tape measure to measure the circumference of the tree, and you're going to need something to measure your insecticide with. Now, if you're going to use something like this, like a Pyrex, make sure you label it that it's for pesticides, not food, and this is going to be used for pesticides only. Also, as far as PPE, you should be wearing long sleeves, long pants, and rubber boots in addition to your gloves. So after you buy your product, make sure to read the label on the pesticide yourself very thoroughly, and make sure you understand all the instructions. The label is the law, so we're going to make sure we're following it exactly as far as how to apply it, and also what sort of measures we have to take to protect ourselves and the environment. And keep in mind that while any product with imidacloprid, if you soak it into the roots, it will provide protection against hemlock woolly adelgid. Each specific product may have directions that vary. So it's really important that you read the label before doing any of this. So in order to determine how much pesticide you're going to need, You're gonna need a flexible tape to measure the circumference of the tree at about chest height, so 4.5 feet above the ground. And then you're gonna wanna rake away all the organic material below the tree. So now that I got my gloves on, we've determined that the circumference of that tree over there is 29 inches. And this label specifies that we're gonna apply at 1 fluid ounce per inch of circumference. So we're gonna add 29 fluid ounces of this product. And so it's important to read on the label details such as for this, if the tree is larger than 16 inches in diameter, you're gonna apply this in 2 gallons as opposed to 1. So what we're gonna do is dilute 29 fluid ounces into 2 gallons of water here. We're gonna make sure it's nice and mixed up, and then we're gonna go apply it in bands around the tree. Before we measure it out, we're gonna go ahead and shake our product a little bit so it's not settled. And then as far as where I'm gonna mix this, I'm just gonna make sure that I'm not in an area where there's gonna be kids or pets running around if I do happen to spill any. Pouring very carefully. And we have this cart here because it's a level surface and because it will contain any spills. And so now that I'm ready to mix, I put on safety glasses in case of splashes. Make sure to follow whatever the label says as far as PPE. So once I have my 29 ounces, as you can see here, I've added some water. You want to add about 20 to 50% of the total water you're going to use before you actually pour in your product. So now I'm going to pour in my product. And so next, there's still some residue in the measuring cup. So what we're gonna do is over top of our bucket where we're mixing it, I'm gonna go ahead and as I'm pouring water in, I'm going to use that water to clean out our measuring device. One thing I forget to mention here, after you're done adding water, you're gonna wanna stir the mixture to make sure that it's uniform. And an easy way to do that, and what I did here, is just use a stick from nearby. And I'm gonna keep doing this until I get 2 gallons. Now we have our mixed pesticide ready to go to apply it to the tree. Keep in mind that where we mixed it was over a level surface, easy for filming. Another good place to mix it is over where you're actually applying it. So if you spill anything, it's right where it needs to be and it's not gonna cause any problems. So our label specifies that for a tree over 16 inches in circumference, we're gonna apply a 4-foot band to it. So what I'm gonna do is apply this all around the tree for 4 feet as evenly as I can. So we talked about ideal timing for identifying Hemlock woolly adelgid, but we also need to talk about timing for pesticide application. For a root soak, the best time to apply is in the early spring, right when the growing season is starting, when the soil is moist but not waterlogged. However, you can apply a root soak product at any time during the growing season, but if the soil is dry, you need to irrigate it the night before to make sure that it's moist when you're actually applying the insecticide, because the moisture level is really important for the tree actually being able to uptake the pesticide. Next, we're gonna move on to our horticultural oil. So just like a root soak product, before we do anything, we're gonna wanna make sure that we read the label very carefully. And this is gonna specify what sort of mixture you're gonna need for what time of year. So when the tree is dormant, you're gonna use more oil than when the tree is active. So that's really important to note on here. And then the PPE is also gonna be different. So for this specific product, protective eyewear is required because as we're spraying this, it has the potential to get in your eyes. So same deal as the other product, we're gonna make sure it's well mixed before we pop it open. And so for this time of year, for a hemlock tree, we're gonna be applying it 5 tablespoons per gallon. So up to the first nubs here, this container tells me that it is a 1/4 of a gallon, so 32 ounces. So we're gonna divide that by 4. And we're gonna go ahead and measure this with the measurement device that came with the product here. So because we're applying 5 tablespoons per gallon, remember we're gonna divide that by 4 and get 1.25. And so these are pretty precise measurements on this specific measuring device, so we really want a level surface for that. I'm going to very carefully pour out 1.25. And there we go, we have a 1.25. I'm going to pour this in. Remember, if you're mixing it, a good practice is to be mixing it over where you're actually applying it, so if you spill anything, it's not going to be a big deal. So I pour that in nice and carefully, and we're going to do the same thing. And then I grabbed a smaller water container because it's easier for mixing these to make sure you're not going to spill. So ever so carefully, I'm going to apply some more water. And as you can see, you're going to see some oil on the surface there. So that was product that was still in the measuring device. So it's good that we're getting that. And we're going to do this a couple times. And then keep in mind, this is an emulsifiable concentrate. So because there's oil, if you're mixing this over something or near something like wood that you care about staining, make sure you're not doing that. Luckily, this is a cart, so it doesn't matter. So, yep, not really seeing any oil left. So I'm going to go ahead and mix the rest of it all the way up to where I need to. So I'm going to mix it up again, make sure it's uniform throughout. You don't want to go too crazy. If you get some crazy foaming, just give it a minute to settle down. But you just want to make sure that the oil is carried uniformly throughout the water. So horticultural oil sprays work best on smaller trees like this one. I say usually about 10 feet, depending on how good your sprayer is, if it can reach the top. So when you're spraying it, first, you don't want to apply this whenever there's rain predicted for the next 24 hours because the product can wash off. And also you want to make sure when you're spraying it, you're getting it really thick. And so you want to keep spraying it until it starts dripping off the tree, and that's how you know you've covered it enough. And another thing, to the best that you can, to what you can reach, make sure you're getting the undersides and the top sides of these branches. Most of the Hemlock woolly Adelgid will be on the underside, but you want to make sure you're thorough. And then me personally, I like to go around the tree and get all of it, or as high up as I can, at an entire stage of the tree as I go around, making sure I can get as many branches as possible. Again, making sure you're getting it until it drips. And then one final note here, if it's a windy day, you don't want to apply this because it's going to go everywhere. And the nice thing about getting one of these professional sprayers from a hardware store is when you're closer up, you can adjust the spray to be wider. And if I'm trying to get a branch that's farther up the tree, I can adjust again so it can shoot farther up the tree. And after we've treated as much of the tree as we can with the horticultural oil, we're going to go ahead and do the same root soak treatment for this tree that we did with the previous one. And there you go. That's how you can save your hemlock trees with just a few products from your local hardware store. For most property owners, especially residential ones, this entire process will cost less than $100. But keep in mind that you have a lot of property, and if you have a lot of hemlocks, it may cost more, and you may want to talk to a tree service professional. It's important to note how critical it is that we protect our hemlock trees in West Michigan. Due to the advance of Hemlock woolly Adelgid, the eastern hemlock is now considered a threatened species. This is important to us not only because the trees are so beautiful, but also because they're incredibly ecologically important. The eastern hemlock provides habitat and resources for many species of wildlife. It also assists in water regulation and soil erosion control. Thank you for watching this tutorial on how to treat your hemlocks with just a few products from a hardware store.